Hello everyone, Luke here and welcome back to the channel. So if you remember a while ago, I actually did a PC build where I was trying to keep it under £100. And to be honest, we completed that task very successfully. And I mean, we even use that computer right now to do our live streams and it handles it pretty well. So, going on that same concept, I want to build another computer. But here's the catch. I want to build it for absolutely nothing. So, after a couple weeks of actually trying to gather parts together, I eventually managed to get everything together, which is awesome. So, let me go through some of the methods of what I did to actually gather some of these parts. So, there's only a few methods that I really used. So the first thing that I did was just ask some of my friends. Most of my friends in my network are really into their computers, and actually one of them is an IT manager at a local company anyway. So after asking them for a couple of days, it turned out that they had nothing. Which is okay, I just told them to keep their eyes open, and eventually a couple of my friends contacted me saying that they had a few spare components that I could just have, because they've just been lying around for God knows how long. So from that, I managed to get some RAM, and I managed to get a graphics card. So, here's the graphics card, and it's not very good. It's a HD 5850, and it's a 2GB GDDR5. Now, here's the kicker. With the CPU and motherboard, I basically just found it in a bin. I pulled it out of the computer and it seemed to work perfectly. And what I'm actually going to be using is AMD Athlon X4750X, I think it's called. Anyway, it's a quad-core CPU and it's clocked at about 3.2 MHz. And that comes with the motherboard. And this is a Micro ATX and it's a gigabyte motherboard. And to be honest, I'm not going to be reading out the code, so you can just take a look at that. And finally, let's get into the last components. I actually had this computer case lying around, but it is broken, so I have to make sure that I'm taping the front panel onto it, otherwise it will just decide to fall apart. And here is the hard drive, and you're going to notice that this is a pretty old hard drive because I actually managed to salvage it from an old computer that we had floating around the office. So, it's 80 gigabytes and it doesn't have very fast read and write speeds, but it's okay. And last but not least, here is the power supply. And we actually got given this by Biotechnics a while ago, and I decided to use it because one, it has a 24-pin connector, and two, it has a PCIe connector as well. So this is rated at 400 watts, which should be plenty enough for what we want to do because it's going to be quite low powered because it's quite old architecture. So now we know what we've got, let's take an overview look at the components. So, right now, the grand price of everything right here was £0. So what we're going to do is build it up into a computer now. Okay, so now we've given everything a little bit of a dust down, the first thing to do is install our CPU. So on your CPU, you'll have a little corner on it which is highlighted like this, and there should be a corner on the actual motherboard where you should correspond it with. So make sure that you've pulled your arm all the way out. Rest your CPU in there because you don't want to bend the pins. Make sure it's in there properly and then give it a little push down. And that is the CPU installed. Next thing to do is install our RAM. So what you want to do is find a little notch in the RAM stick and then make that correspond with the notch on the actual DDR slot. So you put that in, firm pressure, 1 click, 2 click, and you do the exact same thing with the other one. 1 click, 2 click. Okay, now we've got the CPU and the RAM installed onto this board, it's time to install the CPU cooler. And I've made up some of my very special graphene-based thermal paste just because it works really well, and best off, I don't have to pay anything for it. So, I'm just going to grab a little pea-sized amount. That will diddly... bit extra, yeah, that will do. And now we can install our CPU cooler. Right, so now our CPU cooler is installed, we've got our RAM on here, it's time to bring out the case and actually install our motherboard. And then we can start installing our graphics card, our power supply and our hard drive, and then we can try and get Windows installed on it too. So, let's do that. Right, so we've basically got everything installed. There's our hard drive, there is our power supply. So what we're going to do is basically connect everything up, attach the front panel, get the front panel connectors on, and then finally time to put the graphics card in. Once we've done that, we can try and boot it up, and fingers crossed that the thing's going to post. And there we go, that's everything absolutely installed. And there's one thing to note, my GPU nor my motherboard have shields for them. So, my motherboard's okay, but the GPU had a lot of sag. So this is what I've done to rectify that. I just think that's hilarious. But now everything's installed, let's actually put the case back together, turn it on, and see if it posts. Right, so now everything's connected, it's actually time to boot it up and see if it wants to post. And would you look at that, it's actually booted up. So that build went really well, and the best feature about it is the fact how it cost nothing. So I managed to get it posted and I managed to install Windows 10 onto it without a single problem, which I'm a little bit stunned about. I was really expecting to run into something, but absolutely nothing. And I'm not going to bore you with the benchmarks, but I managed to install a few games too. So, the first one that I installed was Counter-Strike Global Offensive, of course, and I was averaging around 100 to 110 frames at about 720p and all of the settings at around medium, which is exactly how I play no matter what PC system I'm on, so I'm glad that it ran it pretty well. And I tried two others, one of which is Clone Hero, if any of you guys know that, it's a rhythm game, and to be honest, it's not very difficult to run at all, but again, it ran it amazingly considering the components that are in there. And finally, was Minecraft Java Edition. It's the newest version, so I think it's something like 1.17 or something like that. And in the recent years, it's become a way more demanding game. So when I logged in, it was juttering everywhere. But after I turned down the settings, again down to around 720p, I changed the graphics down from fanciest to fastest and turned the shadows off, I was averaging over 60 frames per second, which to me, that is completely playable, and I'm really impressed with the performance of this thing. So I'm really glad that I managed to scavenge all the parts together for this and get it actually completed, and I'm really happy with the result. So, with that being said, that does bring me to the end of this video. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them all. Anyway guys, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you later, and don't forget to subscribe.